with all the shops here in town, there's still a lot of selling to be done. So people are still making money here. Today we tend to call it the Visa Rush.
Today, Skagway can see up to 10,000 tourists a day during the summer months.
Most tourists, I find, aren't that interested in the history until they get here. And then they're like amazed at what happened in this little town and how the whole world was focused on here for just a few months.
Back in the fall of 1897 and continuing on for a few years, Skagway was anything but a vacation spot. The men and women that found themselves in that region of the world were there for business. Gold was their focus, and struggle their reality.
There were two ways of getting rich during the gold rush. You could dig gold out of the ground, that was one way, but that's a lot of hard work. Who wants to do that, right? The other way was to start a business or provide a service, that kind of thing. And there were people who settled in Skagway to do just that.
If I might offer some advice, if you ever find yourself in the middle of a gold rush, my advice is to open a bar.
It did not take long for the town of Skagway to be seen as little better than hell on earth.
People were overcharging. It was a greedy time.
The lawless nature of the town suggested great opportunity for one notorious conman, Jefferson Randolph Smith.
There's honest businessmen, and then there's dishonest businessmen.
He quickly organized the shadier element in town, if you will.
Come see the Days of 98 show live on stage with Soapy Smith, Alaska's most notorious outlaw.
He got his name, Soapy, from his scheme with selling soap.
I have a new soap. I have a wonder soap. Here is the finest cleansing agent ever brought forth by man's scientific ingenuity. The fruit of many weary months of research and experiment in my own laboratory. Use this soap upon your skin, and it will glow like the moon. Your face will shine with the radiance of 1,000 candles. Is that bald spot growing, sir? Use my soap, and the patriarchal locks once more will adorn your brow.
He'd wrap bars of soap in money, a $100 bill or a $50 bill, a $20 bill, and people would come and buy the soap for an outrageous price because they wanted to win the $100 bill.
I will sell you a bar from these I have already wrapped for the ridiculous price of $5. And you will have the privilege of choosing your own package.
But of course, his men were planted in the crowd, and they would come up and win the money, and so everyone was trying to buy the soap.
He quickly sold out of his soap and quickly disappeared because he knew that all the people would be opening their soap and finding nothing.
Soapy was doing the same thing earlier, and he got kicked out of Colorado, and when he heard about the gold rush, or the discovery of gold up here, he made his way up to Alaska to take advantage of what was going on in Skagway.
No one really knew what to expect as they first stepped off the ship onto the beach of Skagway. Any communication in and out of this town to the rest of the world could take months. In all the confusion, Soapy Smith saw this lack in communication as an opportunity for power and wealth.
He had a famous telegraph that would, people would pay money to send messages home.
Tell them that you got here and you were safe, and they would telegraph back and say that, oh, well, maybe Johnny had just been run over by a horse and needed to go to the hospital, and they didn't have enough money. And
people were told that they could come into his telegraph office and give their gold to the agent there, and it would be, quote, wired back to their home bank. Well, that never really happened.
If they would learn something here in Skagway, if they would learn that you can't trust anyone or anything, well, maybe they would become suspicious of that telegraph company. Suspicious enough to follow that grand and glorious cable out of the back of the office, down over the bank, and into the Lynn Canal, where it ends just past the dock.
He had a telegraph station with wires going out of the building and into the woods, and they were just tied off on a tree further up the hill.
It went nowhere, so no one was getting messages out of here.
Basically, he ran a very successful criminal syndicate here in this town.
The town of Skagway was in rapid development. While hotels and saloons were run by profiteers, many restaurants were run by men with icicle feet, whose fare consisted of only their required goods to enter into Canada.
And so a lot of people, when they realized what they're facing, they said, you know what, I'm going home.
Their dreams for riches were over before they began. These men were now only concerned with selling their goods to earn enough money for a ticket home.
From 1897 to 98, over 60,000 people arrived in Skagway in an attempt to get across the border and get into the Yukon.
Well, there is a difference between the two countries as far as law and law enforcement went. In Canada, you had the Northwest Mounted Police, and of course the Canadian government had the codified law. When the gold was discovered, more mounted police were sent up to the Yukon. So on the Canadian side, things were pretty well regulated, whereas in Skagway, it was a little bit loose up there.
It was required by the Northwest Mounted Police that any stampeder entering into Canada must be equipped with 1 year's worth of provisions. This weighed out to about 2,000 pounds. That's 1 ton worth of food and equipment per person.
So that you wouldn't become a ward of the Canadian government.
There are any number of services which my associates and I provide.
Soapy Smith saw yet another opportunity to swindle the stampeders out of their supplies and money.
Like reliable packers, where a man can have his gear reliably packed up over the White Pass for him, and then he can reliably count on its disappearance.
The packers that would bring the gear up to the White Pass would steal a lot of the gear that was going up there. So when the stampeders got up there, they'd have no gear up there.
Upon arriving by ship to the Skagway-Dyea area, it would take around 3 months to transport this amount of gear 30 miles over the mountain passes. By far, the most challenging and infamous section of the Chilkoot Trail was the Golden Staircase. Its final steps led stampeders right to the Canadian border.
The conditions were pretty rough. They were steep. It was hard to climb.
The problem is at the very peak of the gold rush, there were so many people going over.
It was pretty much back-to-back people. It looks like a continuous line of humanity going up the golden stairs.
Like a mass of wild buffalo or bison. They were on a mass stampede. They just had to get to the gold.
All these people had to carry their own year's worth of supplies, about 2,000 pounds worth, over the pass by themselves by relaying it back and forth.
That was usually, 50 trips up the pass.
Each person carrying on an average of 50 pounds on their back, walking on stairs that had been cut into the ice.
That's 3 miles, it's about a 2,600-foot vertical rise, and there are parts of it where you're actually doing scrambling.
When you would deposit your load on the Canadian side, it would be checked off by the Mounties, and then you would slide back down and pick up another bundle and carry it up the stairs.
And there were several places where you could step out of line and rest.
If you fell out of line, if you had to take a break for something, sometimes it would be hours before you could actually get back in the line to start climbing again.
Because everybody was so intent on being the next person up there, and they wouldn't let you in.
There was a lot of competition, basically, to get there first, to get the good claims. So it was pretty hard going.
As the winter months progressed, most people fought the trail themselves, while others hired native packers or utilized the tram system that was developed.
And that was very expensive. The natives were making sometimes up to $100 a day in 1897 and 1898 dollars.
The natives warned stampeders of the real possibility of an avalanche and abandoned the scene.
But the prospectors often didn't have a lot of stock in what the natives were doing.
They were ill prepared. They thought they were going to California. The gold rush had just concluded there, and they thought they were going to be in orange and peach trees.
But they have no idea what's in store for them up on that trail. Dawson City is 500 miles away, and along that trail the snow is sometimes 20 feet deep. Winds howling 50 miles an hour, temperatures down to 70 below.
the Stampeders, stricken with gold fever, did not listen and continued packing their goods over the pass.
61 people lost their lives at that point.
Most of them that got to the top of the Chilkoot Pass suddenly realized they had another 500 miles of wilderness.
Right from the very beginning, people and companies were trying to find the easiest way to get over these mountains.
There was a number of investors looking to invest, make money in the gold rush. They sent a team to Skagway to see about the possibilities of building a railroad.
And the whole idea was to get people and their supplies over these mountains as quickly and efficiently and as cheaply as they possibly could.
The announcement of a railroad being constructed from Skagway to Whitehorse promised to open several doors, while closing a few in its wake.
Soapy Smith and his gang basically ran Skagway. They had the deputy marshal on the payroll, so the law enforcement that existed turned a blind eye to what was going on.
Basically, Soapy controlled anything going in and out of Skagway. When the railroad came in, that was going to be the new thing, and they wanted to get Soapy out of control so that they can have control of that.
About 500 Skagway citizens, including the legendary Frank Reed, met up to conspire against Soapy's control.
They're in the middle of another one of their meetings. They're trying to decide what to do about me. Decide. Hell, they're armed to the teeth. I think they've already decided. Well, you know what? I decide. And I've decided to put a stop to their whining and their sniveling and their damn secret meeting.
So there were some folks in Skagway who took exception to the way Soapy was controlling the town.
Basically, they wanted to get rid of Soapy, so they were holding a meeting to gather a mass down at the wharf and for support to get rid of Soapy.
Frank Reed thinks he can take this town from me. Not while I live.
Jefferson Winkle!
So Soapy actually went down to talk them out of ganging up on him.
He came down to the front of the wharf with his rifle.
Tried to stop the meeting. Someone got in his way at the wharf and he pushed them off the dock. Frank Reed pulled his pistol. Soapy got off a shot.
And Soapy fired. Frank fired.
Wounded Frank Reed, and 12 days later, Reed was dead. Soapy was shot through the heart.
Soapy had only been here for, what, 8 months before he met his demise. Wasn't even here a year, you know? And yet he has just this huge reputation.
So that was the shootout that ended Soapy's life and also ended his gang's life.
In a single fateful night, Skagway was rid of Soapy Smith's lawless reign.
Problem solved.
The White Pass Yukon Route Railroad affords people the opportunity to travel back in time and follow in the footsteps of the Stampeders of long ago.
The railroad was completed in 1899, so the majority of people who were heading into the Yukon for the Klondike Gold Rush were not able to take advantage of the White Pass and Yukon route.
It was a hardship that nobody reckoned, and those times are immortalized by the men and women who are passionate about the preservation of such a great time in history.
Well, like anything, it's a tradition that if you don't maintain it, it's going to be lost.